In the northeastern part of the United States, people begin to commit mass suicide for unknown reasons. First, people become disoriented, then they stop moving, and finally they find the fastest and most terrible way to kill themselves. A girl pierces her carotid artery with a long hairpin. Construction workers jump from scaffolding. A man at the zoo feeds himself to the lions. Another man lies down under a running mower, etc. The epidemic begins in parks and quickly spreads to nearby settlements. At first, people think it's a biological terrorist attack, but then that theory seems less and less true as things start to happen in smaller towns. Elliot Moore, a high school teacher in Philadelphia, discusses with his students the sudden disappearance of bees in several states. When news of a sudden mass suicide breaks, school is canceled, and Elliot decides to leave town with his wife Alma, his friend Julian, and his 8-year-old daughter Jess. The train they were on stops in a small town in Pennsylvania. The driver says that they have lost contact and cannot go further. Julian learns that attacks terrorists, as everyone thinks, have affected Princeton, New Jersey, where his wife is located. He leaves his daughter Jess with Elliot and Alma, and he goes to his wife in the infected city. Approaching the city, he sees corpses of people hanging on trees on a green alley. The girl, Julian's traveling companion, becomes hysterical in horror. Julian tries to calm her down and distract her, and suddenly notices a gap in the canvas roof of the car, through which contaminated air enters the cabin. Having inhaled it, the driver behind the wheel crashes the car into a tree, and Julian, without receiving fatal injuries, gets out of the car and cuts his wrist with a piece of glass. What happened to his wife is unknown, but it can be assumed that she also died. Meanwhile, Elliot, Alma, and Jess get into the car with 2 gardeners. One of them expresses the theory that plants can attack other living organisms for the purpose of self-defense. He also says that plants can communicate with each other. By car, they reach an intersection, and then it turns out that all the nearby cities have undergone epidemic of suicides. Many other cars arrive at the same intersection, escaping from infected places. People decide to walk across the field to a small settlement, where presumably there has not yet been attacks. They are divided into 2 groups. Elliot, Alma, and Jess end up in a smaller group. The second group was several times larger and walked behind the first. While they were walking, Elliot heard shots behind him. The people of the second group, one after another, were killing themselves with the same pistol. Elliot thinks that it is actually the plants that release a poison that affects humans. The larger the group of people, the more likely it is that plants will trigger a self-defense response. Elliot suggests splitting into 3 more groups. Alma, Jess, and 2 teenagers, George and Jimmy, remain with him. While searching for food for Jess, Elliot's group came across a barricaded house with survivors inside who still believe that terrorists are to blame. They do not want to open the doors, and when the teenagers begin to break into the house, the owners shoot with firearms and George and Jimmy die. The survivors, Elliot, Alma, and Jess, have to flee. They go to the house of a woman living in complete isolation, who is unaware of the general panic. She allows them to stay at her house, but is suspicious and somewhat hostile towards the guests. The next morning, Elliot wakes up and cannot find Alma and Jess. He carelessly enters the room of the old woman who let them spend the night, and she screams that he wanted to rob her. The woman, enraged, goes out of the house into the garden, where the plants react to her, and she kills herself by smashing her head against the walls and windows of the house. Realizing that the defense mechanism has become even more sensitive, affecting even one person, Elliot locks himself in the house. He locks himself in a room where he can hear Alma and Jess, who went out into the garden early in the morning and wandered into the barn. There is a pipe underground from this room to the barn outside through which you can talk. Elliot and Alma decide that if they die, then at the last minute they must be together. Together with Jess, they go outside, slowly walk towards each other, but nothing happens apparently. The effect of the toxins stopped before they went outside. 3 months later, Elliot and Alma began a new life with Jess as their adopted daughter. On television, an environmentalist warns that the global epidemic was only a warning of an impending global catastrophe that has never yet existed on our planet, like the rash that precedes infection, or red water undrinkable, like one of the Egyptian plagues. But the TV presenter does not believe him and says that if this were so, then this would happen again in some other place. Elliot stands with Jess at the bus stop. She is going to school for the first time. At this time, Alma finds out that she is pregnant. When Elliot returns, Alma greets him with a smile and tells him that he will soon become a father. The film moves to Paris. 2 young men walking along an alley are talking enthusiastically with each other, but suddenly they notice that people passing by stop freeze. At the same time, the wind sways the trees, and this indicates that there has been a re-release of the toxin into the air. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe.